Welcome, everyone, to another edition of The Travel Show with your host, Ted Blank of Ted Blank Luxury Travel and Adventure. And as we do every Thursday, we chatted up about all things vacation, and I cannot wait to hear what we're going to talk about today. How have you been?
I've been doing well, thank you.
So have you been on any trips you want to tell us about?
Well, I was in the Mediterranean on a cruise
Ooh, lovely.
a month or so ago, and it was absolutely a beautiful cruise. And one day on the cruise, we stopped in one of my favorite countries. And so I thought we could talk a little bit about that today.
Oh, I would love to hear that. So when you hear the word Mediterranean, what exactly does that encompass, please?
Yes, the Mediterranean is the body of water that starts at the Straits of Gibraltar between Spain and Morocco, and it goes all the way over to Turkey. And so Italy, France, Spain, Greece, Malta, Libya, Tunisia, Egypt, those are all countries on the Mediterranean.
And what is the country you want to talk about today?
Well, it's one of my favorites, and I don't really have favorites, but it is one of my favorites. It's like your favorite child.
You don't
have one, but you maybe you do secretly. And so Croatia is one of my absolute favorite countries in the world.
I got to tell you, I would never have thought that would be anybody's favorite unless you lived in Croatia. But
true.
Why is that, Ted?
Well, and I never would have thought that either until I went there
for
the first time. And it is, I think, just the right blend, as the Goldilocks and the Three Bears. It's just right. And it has beautiful scenery, a lot of diverse landscapes, very friendly people with a well-developed tourist industry, but it's not over-touristed. And there are a lot of different interesting things to do, but it's also a place where you can kind of do nothing and enjoy it as well. So to me, it kind of checks all the boxes. It's got a wonderful climate. The ocean is absolutely crystal clear. One of the clearest places in the Mediterranean I've really ever been. Just a great place to go.
So is Croatia focused on tourism, or what is their main industry?
It is one of their main industries now. And I bet a lot of people probably couldn't find Croatia on a map.
No, in fact, I was going to look at my
you're
map.
You're going to Google it. So Croatia is located across the Adriatic Sea from Italy. And Croatia was a part of Yugoslavia during the communist era. And if you remember at the end of the 1990s, or maybe it was the beginning of the 1990s, there was kind of a civil war in Yugoslavia. And Croatia was one of the many independent countries that came out of that.
So it's south of Austria.
Yep, south of Austria.
It
but straight across from Italy.
Yep.
So if you went to Rome and just kind of drew a line eastward across the Adriatic, you'd smack dab right in the middle of Croatia.
Well, it looks absolutely beautiful.
It is, and it's it has kind of two parts to the country. There is what is called the Dalmatian Riviera. And it's not named after the dogs, but back in the day, during the time it was part of the Roman Empire, it was called the province of Dalmatia. Apparently, Dalmatian dogs are not from there, so I don't know how they got their name.
It's
and
another show.
How Cruella ever got her hands in there, I don't know, but she must not be Croatian. So you have a very long, very scenic, very mountainous seaside. And they call that basically the Dalmatian Riviera.
Okay.
And that stretches from the top of the country to the bottom of the country. And then if you go past the coastal mountains, there's a large inland area that's very flat and very agricultural. And so it is not the prime tourist spots. The prime tourist spots are mostly on the ocean side of the country.
So the other industries then would be agriculture?
Yeah, agriculture. They actually make ships in Croatia. There are a couple large shipyards there. And, sort of small, more local industries.
Well, that's interesting that it popped up as some place that is really high on your list. And when you think about going to Croatia, would you ever just go and that's where you spend your entire vacation?
Yeah, and there are probably three main ways you could discover Croatia. And one of them would be on a cruise, because most of the main sites in Croatia are along the ocean. And so there are a lot of nice cruises that start in Venice, make their way down the Croatian coast, and they might end in Athens in Greece. 7, 10, 14 days. Really a place where a small ship cruise is going to be your friend, because a lot of the ports are too small for the big cruise ships.
And when you say small, they're still relatively big.
Anywhere between 200 and 700 passengers.
Perfect.
Yeah, or smaller. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But that's a great way to do it and, get kind of an overview of Croatia. You can take land tours in Croatia. either a customized land tour. I work with some great folks there who really excel at putting together some really neat and unique land programs in Croatia, or as part of a group tour as well. You might also, if you're going to do that, you might also visit Slovenia, which is the country to the north, Montenegro, which is the country to the south, also spectacular, and even Albania, which is a very exotic place, although it's become much more westernized in the last 20, 30 years. Or there's really a unique opportunity in Croatia to take a little local cruise ship, locally owned cruise ship. And they carry 20 to 40 passengers, and they do very in-depth coastal cruises for about a week. And so they are a very nice cruise, not a luxury cruise, but a very nice cruise, and you really get an up-close and personal view of a lot of the smaller islands. And if you pull up a map of Croatia, if you pop it up on a map, you'll see kind of in the far north of Croatia, there's a really large peninsula. And that peninsula is called Istria. And it's only about a 90-minute boat ride from Venice, so very, very easy to get to. It has a ton of incredibly well-preserved Roman ruins up there. There's a city called Pula, and it has one of the largest and best-preserved Roman Colosseums outside of Rome, so really an incredible sight to see. And Istrian wine is famous worldwide. Croatian wine is pretty well known, but when you get to Croatia, there's not much flat land, so they don't produce very much wine in terms of the volume of wine. So most of it gets consumed locally and doesn't get exported. But then if you head south, you get to the city of Split, the city of Dubrovnik. That's kind of the prime tourist area there. Dubrovnik is a very beautiful walled city, very historic, very, very well preserved. And if you're more of a modern pop culture person, it was heavily featured in the Game of Thrones TV series and also in Star Wars. And so ever since then, it's become perhaps even more popular than it ever was. But the walled city is just a beautiful, beautiful place. And you can stroll around inside the walls. You can actually walk around outside the walls. Really, really neat opportunities there. You can kayak around the walls, which I think is kind of a neat way to see it. And then Split is totally different. Split is a little bit larger of a city. And it was founded by the Roman Emperor Diocletian. And Diocletian is probably most famous for persecuting the Christians. But he did something that no other Roman emperor ever did, and he retired. Well, he retired, he went to Split, he built a big palace, and then his past caught up with him, and that was the end of Diocletian. So he didn't last too long in retirement. And
he shouldn't have built the big house.
He shouldn't have built the big house. But the interesting thing is that the big house was basically deconstructed by the locals and used to construct the modern city of Split. So the cathedral and a lot of houses, and it's the most bizarrely interesting place. The streets are barely wide enough for two people to squeeze through, and some of the buildings, you can tell that they must have gotten the really good stones off the front of the palace, and some of the other ones didn't, and it's just a really, really cool city.
How old of a city?
Diocletian was, in the 300-400s, I think. So really, really old historic city. So those are kind of the two bookends of this part of Croatia. And then there are all these beautiful little islands. Hvar and Korčula and Miljet and places that are hard to pronounce. One of my favorite islands is actually the island of Miljet. And it's kind of cool because it has a national park on the island. And so you get off your ship and you walk about a mile and you come into the national park and then you come onto a lake. So you're on an island standing by a lake, and then you get on a boat and you go across the lake to another island. So you're on an island in a lake on an island. And there's an old monastery on this island, and it's not used as a monastery anymore, but people still live there, and they have goats and sheep and things like that. So they make cheese and things like that. So it's kind of a cool, quirky little place. They make wine there, too. And then if you go a little bit inland near Split, there is one of the most beautiful places in Europe. And it's a national park that's called the Plitvice Lakes National Park. And it is full of waterfalls and rock formations. It is just a beautiful, beautiful place that you can explore on foot. You can explore on a little tour boat that takes you around. But, other countries have national parks beside the United States. And this is probably one of the most beautiful national parks in the world and really well worth seeing when you're in Croatia.
Ted, there is no way you could put a trip like this together, some of these things that you're talking about. So that really is the benefit of working with somebody that's a travel expert, isn't it? Yeah,
and I work with the cruise lines, I work with the people who run the yacht cruises, but I also work with some folks who are Croatian, and they're based in Croatia. They have deep, deep relationships with hotels and tour operators, but also quirky places you can go, like family farms, where you can go and see what a family farm is like in Croatia. And I work with them, and we put together, a real unique, customized itinerary for folks, where what you do, what you and your family do, is going to be different than what the next person does. And it's a place that really lends itself well to it. I just had some folks come back from there about 2 months ago, and they didn't have a lot of time. They only had about 9 days, and that's a little short of a time to see everything in Croatia. But what we decided to do is we decided to rent a speedboat with the captain for them. And so they were able to actually go from island to island and go a lot faster than they would have been able to do if they had wanted to do like the regular scheduled ferries between the islands. They were able to squeeze a little more in, go to a few more places, but not be rushed. And so that's the kind of thing we can do. We can really customize those things. And, I don't know how the average person would find a reliable, reputable speedboat to rent in Croatia that has, insurance and a licensed captain and all that good stuff. And so it really makes a lot of things possible because I have these relationships with these folks in the country.
And those are something that you've spent years building.
Absolutely, yes.
I think people don't understand that.
No, I think sometimes, when I go on a trip somewhere, people will kind of joke and say, oh, I envy your job. And certainly in many ways, that is nice. I do get to go to those places. But that's what I'm doing there, is I'm looking to meet those folks and to test them out and, see if the juice is worth the squeeze, if they're delivering what they say they're going to be delivering. And so that's part of why I travel to do those things. And it's enjoyable, but it's also work. In my own defense.
Yeah, traveling
show prep too.
It's show prep, and it's all sorts of things.
Yep.
This whole area of the world, and especially Croatia, it's not really something that I would think, oh, that's on my bucket list for a vacation, but you've made it sound very, very intriguing.
It should be. I mean, if you've ever thought about going to Italy, or if you've been to Italy and you want a place that's a little similar but different, it's a great choice. Greece, the same thing. If you've ever been to Greece or you've wanted to go to Greece, similar but different. And, great for families, great for grown-ups. There's a lot there for everyone.
So Croatia is a great standalone place, but it also could be a stop if you are, as you mentioned, leaving Venice on a cruise.
Yeah, so there are some really nice cruises, and as unique as tall ship cruises. We've talked about the tall ship cruises. They go to Croatia. It's a real great place there. Even, more mainstream cruises will stop primarily in Split or Dubrovnik. And you can then continue to Montenegro, which also used to be part of Yugoslavia. And the cruise ships go to the town of Kotor. And the Bay of Kotor is another just incredibly scenic place. If you Google pictures of some of these places, you'll realize how breathtaking they are. And if you pick the right small ship cruise, and if you're going to end in Athens, the ship will actually sail through something called the Corinth Canal. And the Corinth Canal is about 1 foot wider than the ship. And so to watch the ship's captain put this ship through this narrow, narrow, narrow canal is incredible. Only very small cruise ships can go there, but you can literally reach your hand out and touch the side. And just an incredible experience. And usually if you're doing that cruise, they'll also stop at some of the less visited Greek isles that aren't over-touristed with people. Because unfortunately, anytime there's a place that has a big airport and big hotels, they can get really crowded. And especially in the summer months, July and August, when the weather's the nicest, they can be almost unpleasantly crowded. And so this is a way to avoid that. Croatia doesn't have anywhere near the big resorts or anything like that, so it doesn't tend to be as over-touristed. But certainly July and August are going to be busy times there. The last time I went and actually spent some quality time in Croatia, I went in October. And it was still warm enough that you could hop off the back of the ship right into the ocean and swim, and you didn't feel cold. November might be a little chilly, but any time between sort of early April and mid-October is a good time to go. And if you avoid June and July, you'll avoid the peak of the tourist season.
And you mentioned that 9 days that your clients went, was a little short. What would you say?
2 weeks is a good amount of time. I think you can really see everything in Croatia and not have to feel rushed. I mean, they moved a few too many times for kind of my personal taste. You could have spent 2 or 3 nights in a place instead of just one night. And some of the islands, especially, they're just a place where, you go, you stay at a hotel, it has a nice beach, a nice pool, and you just kind of relax and immerse yourself in the culture and the lifestyle there. So to have a little more time to do that, if you can do 12 days to 2 weeks, I think that's great.
It's amazing that there still are places that are on a cruise itinerary that are really still off the beaten track.
It's very true, but there are. They're harder to find,
Okay.
but there absolutely are, and Croatia has several of them.
And that's nice for a different, as you mentioned, it's more relaxing for a different kind of cruiser. So who would you say this trip appeals to?
Croatia is a big family destination. It can be a great place for families. I would say if you've maybe been to a European country before, if you've been to France, you've been to Spain, maybe Italy, and you want to see something different. Croatia is part of the European Union. The euro is their currency. So it's a modern country from that perspective, but it really has a very, very different feel to it. And so that's probably who I would recommend thinking about going to Croatia. Maybe somebody who'd been to one of the more popular mainstream countries and wants to do something a little different and see something, the whole country is a little bit off the beaten path and parts of it are very much off the beaten path.
And what is it influenced by?
Interesting. It was part of the Roman Empire for a long time. And then for many, many years, it was part of the Venetian Empire. And so there is a lot of Venetian influence there, but it's a Slavic country. So the people are related to the Bulgarians and the Romanians. Interestingly enough, Croatia is a very Catholic country. Serbia, the other big country that came out of Yugoslavia, is Orthodox Christian. And then Bosnia is partially Catholic, partially Orthodox, and partially Muslim. So it's a very interesting melting pot of cultures that haven't always melted together very well in the past. I mean, there have been some wars in the past. Right now, it's a very safe, very stable place.
And again, if we want to learn more or reach out to you and have you meet with us, how could we do that, please?
Yeah, best way to get a hold of me is to call me at 651-964-8245, or you can visit my website at tedblanktravel.com, and when you're there, you can sign up for my e-newsletter, or you can actually request an appointment as well.
Great to see you. Thank
see
you
you.
so much. Croatia. Love it. And you are listening to another edition of The Travel Show with your host, Ted Blank of Ted Blank Luxury Travel and Adventure.